Karl Faase, thanks so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you come here at the end of July to speak about Jesus. But first of all, Karl, what do you get up to throughout the week? What are your primary front lines?
No, I'm the CEO, which is a very exalted title for somebody who runs a small Christian media organisation. But I run Olive Tree Media. And look, that's a whole mix of things, Michael. The last 2 years, who knows what we were doing? We're all stuck at home. I'm married to Jane, who's actually the creative director and producer of the material that we do, and we work together, children and grandchildren. So that's pretty remarkable. And in my spare time, to keep a bit fit, I ride a bike. So that's my go-to form of exercise and getting out and about.
Awesome. So, Karl, how did you first come to know Jesus?
Oh, look, I wrote an article after my dad's death, actually, which was just sadly about 18 months ago. And the article was called, when people ask me how I became a Christian, I always say, let me tell you about my dad. And it's been a reflection that's come around recently. So I was born in Gunnedah in Western New South Wales, and my dad was a German immigrant and was sponsored out to Australia to work on a farm at a tiny place called Tambar Springs. And Tambar Springs had a new minister in 1962, and his name was Darrell Robinson. And he was an evangelical minister who wanted to share the message of Jesus with the community. So he ran a mission. And two evangelists turned up, one was John Turner and the other was John Chapman. And my dad, who didn't really know anything about Christianity, but basically everybody in the town turned up because what they want to see these city slam preachers and what they were like. Anyway, basically through that, my dad came to faith. Just a remarkable shift in his life. And that just changed the trajectory of our family. So it went from just being your average country family with my dad working on a farm to someone who of faith and got into leadership in church organizations and then some ministry areas. Then about 11, I responded at an event that I was at that significantly shifted my life, and that's been my life and the journey I followed ever since.
Amazing. Praise God. So, Karl, why do you think Jesus is the game changer? You come to speak to us about this at the end of July. Why do you think he is?
Well, I think that clearly, in my life and many people listening, people know Jesus is the game changer because they have changed, each of our lives. And so we feel that. But what we tend not to think about a lot, and I didn't until I did a series a few years ago, that actually demonstrated that Jesus changed the game for Western democratic nations. And we, it's almost like we live in nations where we've got a great country. If it wasn't Christians annoying us, we'd be so much better off. Whereas that's just so far from the truth. The example I use all the time, and I'll keep this as quick as I can and turn up to the lecture. I'm going to talk about this more. There's a guy called Tom Holland, not the guy who's the actor in the Spider-Man movie, the other Tom Holland, who's an academic and writer from England. And we interviewed him for Jesus the Game Changer season 2. And Tom Holland is not a Christian. So that's really important. But to keep this really short, he was a great fan of the Greco-Roman world, wrote books and novels about the Greco-Roman world, documentaries. But a few years went through this sort of crisis in a way. We looked at the Greco-Roman world and thought their values and morals are morally abhorrent and are so far from where we are today. Like Western nations are so far from the Greco-Roman world. And he thought, so what happened? And basically his answer is Jesus of Nazareth happened. That's what happened. And anybody reading, I think anybody giving a reasonable review of the history of the Western world would come up with that answer. And that has influenced our nations in all sorts of remarkable ways, which I'll tell you, because you've got to come at the end of July to the lecture.
Oh, we're so looking forward to it. So who should we also bring along to the public lecture as well?
Look, it's just people who are interested in what makes us tick as a nation and what makes us tick as a people. And if there's, your average angry atheist, you're probably not going to get them there. One needs to remember that there's actually not many of them around. Most people are actually interested in spiritual things. Most people are open to the idea of faith. In fact, still in Australia, there's a very high percentage of people who don't go to church and still believe what we believe and are open to faith. I'll perhaps on the day I'll share some research on that demonstrates that's the case. So anybody that's kind of open and interested, what we're going to do is we created a series a few years ago called Jesus the Game Changer. And I'll actually show some clips. So these clips are from all over the world and some incredibly interesting and smart people. And we'll show some clips on the way through as well. So it'll be a mix of me speaking, showing some clips and interacting with how the person of Jesus of Nazareth, hasn't just changed people's lives individually, but actually changed the fabric of Western nations.
Amazing. Well, so looking forward to it. Thanks so much for joining us today. And can't wait till the end of July. Thanks so much, Karl.
See you then. Thanks.